Okay, happy birthday, Cedric Price, born on September 11, 1934, and died in 2003, I think in August. But I'll read a little bit about him. So yes, Cedric Price, he died on the 10th of August in 2003, was an English architect, an influential teacher and writer on architecture. The son of an architect, Price was born in Stone, Staffordshire, and studied architecture at Cambridge University, St. John's College, graduating in 1955. 21, lucky him. And the Architectural Association School of Architecture in London, where he encountered and was influenced by the modernist architect and urban planner Arthur Korn. This school was and is magical, Architectural Association. They produced and they continue to produce those who move the world of architecture. In my opinion, if you study the page of the Architectural Association on Wikipedia, you see that I think 80% of the architects who moved the world of architecture studied there. This is not a little thing at all. From 1958 to 1964, he taught part-time at the AA and at the Council of Industrial Design. He later founded PolyArc, an architectural schools network. By the way of PolyArc, RIBA organized during a few years, 4 or 5 years, an event that had its name PolyArc, and there were students from Romania, from Bucharest, that I know of, who sent projects to these events. But the idea originated with Cedric Price. After graduating, Price worked briefly for Erno Goldfinger, Dennis Lasden, whom we celebrated a few days ago, the partnership of Maxwell Fry and Jane Drew, and applied unsuccessfully for a post at London County Council, working briefly as a professional illustrator before starting his own practice in 1960. He worked with the Earl of Snowdon and Frank Nobby, anyway, names on the design of the Snowdon Aviary at the London Zoo. This is a work he built, and you are going to see it. He later also worked with Buckminster Fuller on the Claverton Dove. One of his more notable projects was the East London Fun Palace, developed in association with theatrical director Joan Littlewood and cybernetician Gordon Pask. Although it was never built, its flexible space influenced other architects, notably Richard Rogers and Renzo Piano, whose Centre Georges Pompidou in Paris extended many of Price's ideas, some of which Price used on a more modest scale in the Interaction Center at the Kentish Town, London, from 1971. Now, I am far from being an expert in Cedric Price. My role here is that of a provocateur. I want to, by the way of these celebrations, paying homage, to bring to the attention of both myself and others, those that I think we should know. And he's a difficult case because he didn't build impressively. There are no, 1 or 2 buildings he built, and yet he seems to continue to be influential through his thoughts, which are rather unconventional, because in a way he was an anti-architect and he advocated implicitly or explicitly anti-building. He was an un-architect and promoted an un-architecture. Well, what is un-architecture? On one hand is a non-architecture, but on the other hand is an anarchic architecture. That is, he was a provocative force in the field of architecture. And in 2002, he received the Kistler Prize in architecture in Vienna. Frederick Kistler, being an experimental architect, so to speak, and designer and other things that happened to be born in Romania, but very few people know of him. And he is the best known architect born in Romania in the world, but not within Romania. This is very strange again. And he is so important for architecture that in Vienna, a few steps from St. Stephen's Cathedral is the Kistler Foundation. Anyway, we move forward. So having conceived the idea of using architecture and education as a way to drive economic redevelopment, notably in the North Staffordshire potteries area, the Thinkbelt project, and you are going to see pictures of that project, he continued to contribute to planning debates. Thinkbelt envisaged the reuse of an abandoned railway line as a roving higher education facility, re-establishing the potteries as a center of science and technology. Mobile classroom, laboratory, and residential modules could be moved, grouped, and assembled as required. Now, you know, it's kind of a funny coincidence that I talked about Constantin Chiriac and the fact that there was a play performed in a tram car, in a tramway, in a tram. You know, here we have, Cedric Price thinking of a school using the abandoned railway line. So again, you know, the non-conformists of this world, they should actually, I imagine they, you know, it's a desire, it's a wishful thinking, you know, on the model of the, you know, the slogan in communism, you know, proletarians of all the world unite, or workers, I forgot exactly how it was. Maybe we should launch a call to arms, so to speak. Non-conformists of the whole world unite, because Cedric Price and Constantin Chiriac, paradoxically, they meet over the years. Anyway, in 1969, with planner Sir Peter Hall and the editor of New Society magazine, Paul Barker, he published Non-Plan, a work challenging planning orthodoxy. This is also very interesting because we think that in architecture, you cannot build without a plan, without planning. In fact, planning is almost, is everything for architecture. Well, he had other ideas, and it is here that I would like to say something, and maybe you'll get a little bit uneasy because I'm going to refer to mythology. In my opinion, we are now in a period of again and again some kind of a transition from a man-centered world to a something else-centered world, if we are still thinking about the center. What I want to say is this. The European cultural development happened on the shoulders of Prometheus. We know about Prometheus. He stole the fire from the gods and gave it to the humans. And the humans began to use that fire in ways that we know of. And we arrived here in the 21st century. But there is someone that I learned about accidentally, that Prometheus had a brother. His name was Epimetheus. And we totally forgot about Epimetheus. Totally. We only thought of Prometheus because it was convenient for us human beings, right? He gave us the fire. And without it, we wouldn't be. And with it, here we are building higher and higher, wider and wider, and so on, polluting the earth also. Now, Epimetheus is very, very interesting, and it is my claim that Cedric Price is an Epimethean figure. And I will explain why. In Greek, Prometheus means the one who first plans, who first thinks, and then he acts. In a way, he is the paradigmatic architect. He first thinks and then he acts. This is what the very word Prometheus means. Epimetheus, by contrast, means the very opposite, is the one who first acts and then he thinks. And of course, he was condemned to being forgotten because he seemed to be irresponsible. He was playful. Prometheus loved the human beings, but he didn't care about animals, plants, and the gods. While Epimetheus was the very opposite. He revered the gods, he cared about the plants and the animals and the stones, but he didn't care about the human beings. In my opinion, it is high time to remember the forgotten brother of Prometheus, that is Epimetheus. Because Epimetheus saw an importance that we didn't as followers of Prometheus in what was outside of the human being. So, in my opinion, Cedric Price is some kind of over thousands of years, some kind of a follower of Epimetheus, because he was advocating playfulness. In a way, he was irresponsible. In a way, he was, he worked for the fun palace. We just read about it. He advocated spontaneity. He advocated unarchitecture. So what is unarchitecture? In a way, it's an Epimethean architecture, if we are still to talk about architecture. So yes, I think that Cedric Price is an Epimethean architect. Now you might call him an architect or anarchic architect or anti-architect or anti-builder. Somehow he seems to be connected, in my opinion, to Epimetheus. You see the name of the publication, non-planned. This would be inconceivable for a conventionally trained and conventionally thinking architect. What do you mean non-planned? But this non-plan has the virtue of spontaneity, which is something which is something that is not very present in the way we do architecture these days. And for a long time, actually, maybe there was a level of spontaneity in the Middle Ages, maybe even before, I don't know, but in the Middle Ages, I don't know where the working drawings, the ultimate, the final, the extremely detailed drawings for the cathedral. I don't think there were. Even the houses, the buildings, the domestic buildings. So it was a different relationship with the world, not just with architecture. This was the man. This is a graphic work. But you see in the upper right corner, we see a clown, and he could give the impression that he's not serious, but he's serious in just as much as Epimetheus was serious, but in a different way. And I truly think Cedric Price epitomizes, without trying to idealize him, and also, I don't actually know enough about him, but the little I know about him tells me that he was irritated by the highly self-centered architect. He was irritated by the pretense of the architect that he is the center of the universe here on Earth. And in a way, in this, he connected with Frank Lloyd Wright and with Le Corbusier, because Le Corbusier said, I love painters and I love engineers, but I don't love architects. While Frank Lloyd Wright said, nothing wrong with architecture except the architects. Why would an architect be against architects like Le Corbusier and also, of course, Frank Lloyd Wright and Cedric Price? Maybe they saw something in the architect that they thought, the three of them thought, that should be problematized and questioned. You know, he loved to play. He loved to play, and you know, you would say, wait a minute, you know, we are too serious, we have too many problems, why should we play? Well, you know, what would creativity be without playing? I don't think you can create in the absence of homo ludens. He was actually a very serious man, but he understood, just like Epimetheus, that there is another side besides the Promethean conception that we have to be morose and stern and tense and build and build and build and build, cover the earth with cement and asphalt and steel and glass, you know. So we should discuss about this. Now, you might say, looking at him, he doesn't seem to be a very modest man. Now, maybe this is just a persona, you know, it's a shield behind which he was hiding. It's possible. Again, I don't know really enough about him. I regret that Bernard Tschumi is not here, because I sent him a photograph. Well, he knows this photograph is a well-known photograph, him with the Cedric Price, I think the Architectural Association. Anyway, look at him here. He was a child in a way, you know, but we need such children, in my opinion, you know, the so-called irresponsible ones. I think we need people like Epimetheus, you know, to love plants, animals, to revere maybe the gods, and also to love the stones, and maybe to love themselves less, maybe. You would say this man is far from not loving himself. Look at him; he seems to be. Well, no, I truly think it's a persona. It's a theatrical posturing. Here, I think we see more. I see even a compassionate man here. You know, okay, with a kindness about the expression on his face. In my opinion, he is smoking and smoking and smoking. Now, he got the Kistler Prize, as I said, in 2002 in Vienna, and he died in 2003. And you'll see the picture with him in 2002. Here he is, you know, an older man, and yes, in a way, he is an enigma. And I mean, for me, it is in part because, you know, you would say, what did this man create so significantly that he is so famous? And he is famous in certain schools of architecture, and, you know, his polyarch activities and his radical pedagogy, because he was promoting radical pedagogy. But that radical pedagogy, it was in a way close in spirit to, you know, having a performance, a play done in a tram, you know, uniting a town in Transylvania with a village. It's again, it's playfulness. It's the playfulness, the deadly serious playfulness of covering the stage of a theater with popcorn, you know, 1 meter high, you know, the whole stage. And it's known that stages in theaters are not so small. Yes, this kind of so-called craziness we need badly, badly. Otherwise, our lives could be suffocating. Now, this is what he said. He said, architectural drawings have a variety of uses: to instruct, to inform, to indulge, to confuse, to confirm, to congratulate, and to console. Cedric Price, quite an assortment of uses: instruct, inform, indulge, confuse, confirm, congratulate, and console. I wonder, isn't there another one? Anyway, Now the Fun Palace for Joan Littlewood project, Stratford East London, England, a perspective drawing. I'm going to go through some drawings. I only have images of one built work, an aviary for the London Zoo. So the Fun Palace for Joan Littlewood was conceived for the East End of London as a laboratory of fun and the university of the streets. I am not lying and I'm not exaggerating. It is happening in Sibiu, the very same thing with the theater. It is a university of the streets. For example, in one year, I don't know, in the end of the 90s, or it was, Romania was not yet part of Europe. And I walked through the streets of Sibiu and I saw a large crowd of people following some people dressed in black with a coffin on their shoulders. And in the central area of Sibiu, and then they climbed on a ladder which was against a wall, against a building, right in the center of Sibiu. They climbed with a coffin on that ladder. Then someone opened the door and threw some water from a pot on the climbers. Then they descended and they continued to walk through the streets of Sibiu. And at one moment they entered the supermarket with a coffin, and rotating the coffin, all the, you know, the things on the shelves fell to the ground. It was a play by a French theater group, part of the International Theater Festival. Beautiful. It was exactly this university of the streets. And I truly think we need something like this, out of the buildings, out of the, you know, the stiff so-called ateliers. Unite art with life. And this is what Cedric Price tried to. So although it was never realized, unlike other visionary projects of the 60s, it was fully intended to be built, designed as a flexible framework into which programmable spaces can be plugged. The structure has as its ultimate goal the possibility of change at the behest of its users. Price belonged to a generation of British architects and educators who used architecture both to address the future and as the ultimate social art. Price's personal vision of the city was inventive and playful and expressed his sense of architecture's moral obligations towards its users. Price was fascinated by new technology and believed that it should both serve the public and further human freedom. He was determined that his work would not impose physical or psychological constraints upon its occupants, nor reduce them to a standard form, unlike typical modern architecture. Now, here I would like to say something. I envy the 60s. There was something, especially towards the end of the 60s, there was something that I admired. All the student movements, the famous 1960s, 1968 in Sorbonne or in Britain or in the United States. The young were protesting against the war, against the obsession with money, against injustice. They wanted love and love making. Now, of course, life is more complicated, but there was an exuberance then that I envy and I wish we had it too. And I wonder, how could we bring that kind of effervescent exuberance to our time? That there wasn't a critical side, of course, but there was also a positive aspiration for a reason to be on this earth where optimism was possible. It was something beautiful, in my opinion. Now, of course, from far away in time and in space, things seem more beautiful than they actually were. But I think there was something then, and the work of Cedric Price fits well in the 60s state of mind. Now, the drawings, yes, you can see now why Richard Rogers and Renzo Piano were influenced by his work when they did Centre Beaubourg, Georges Pompidou. You know, you would say this is an utopian, configuration, and it's no surprise that he didn't build it, although he meant it to be built. I think we need utopia. I think we need dreaming, you know, even if it might appear to be naive, but without that naivete, what do we have? These drawings, you know, sorry for it's a little bit unclear. In essence, if we are to talk in more concrete terms about what he proposed a structure with enough flexibility to allow, in a way, there is some parallel between him and Constant, the Dutch artist, who proposed in his large project, the New Babylon, something perhaps not very different. The architecture in itself, you know, even suggested as it is at the level of models or drawings, is truly about transformation, is about change. Let's give change a chance. Something the more stiff structures of society refuse to do. And I'm happy that in Vienna they have a biennial which has this motto, change was our only chance. Change, yes, change. And if we don't change, we atrophy and we become stiff, if not dead. So he was experimenting with ideas, you know. Imagine this was built. Well, it was not built, but imagine it was built. Of course, he was an idealist. Of course, he was dreaming. He wanted social justice. He wanted equality. He wanted freedom. He wanted playfulness. Now, of course, you know, a more rigorous thinker would say, wait a minute, you can't have so much playfulness without production, without people, producing things that could make money and so on. You cannot erect this building without those. It's true. But how come that we can build this, but not this? Well, this was built by Prometheus. I mean, by those living on Prometheus' shoulders. This was imagined by a follower of Epimetheus. This is my opinion. He did all kinds of drawings. I couldn't study them, you know, in the time I have at my disposal. And plus, some drawings are almost impossible to study because you see the resolution is not great. But I do see a very alive spirit searching, and it's no wonder he received the Kistler Prize, because that's how Frederick Kistler was himself. Now, the Potteries Thinkbelt project that I mentioned at the beginning when I read the text from 1964, 1966, again, the magical 60s, Cedric Price came on to the pre-British architectural scene in the late 50s, a time in which housing complexes, schools, industrial parks, and new towns were springing up all over Britain. There was an overriding belief in a socially responsible architecture and general feeling of optimism about the future and architecture's capacity to improve the environment. Price, however, was determined that his work would not impose physical or psychological constraints upon its occupants, nor reduce them to standards, as did modernist architecture. Through the pairing of humor and playfulness with complete conviction, Price's projects all attest to his belief in an architecture that provides inhabitants as well as viewers individual freedoms. Technology based on the paradigm of a flexible network rather than a static structure played an essential role in Price's work. Now, of course, technology is connected with Prometheus, not with Epimetheus. So I think the Greeks were right. They invented two brothers, not one. not only one man, not only Prometheus. They thought of both. And I think we need we need both. Not just Epimetheus, not just Prometheus, but both. But right now, because we underlined excessively the importance of Prometheus, we forgot Epimetheus. This is why I think at this moment, perhaps we should underline more the significance, the importance of Epimetheus. He did all kinds of drawings, and I like the fact, you know, this is, you would say, a sketch, but this sketch is part of the archive of the Museum of Modern Art in New York, or at least was part of an exhibition. You see, handwriting, calculations, and all the rest. The Pottery Thinkbelt project in this, you are going to see the cover design for the October 1966 issue of the journal Architectural Design, 1964, 1966. There's still a belief in, you know, in the wheel, essentially, you know, the vehicle. And the solitary silhouette, well, there is another one far away, and then we see scaffoldings, and anyway, a picture. Pottery's Thinkbelt was Cedric Price's critique of the traditional university system. Situated in a decaying industrial landscape rather than in the usual urban or rural site, the Thinkbelt occupied 100 square meters of the once vital Staffordshire potteries. It was designed to be an infinitely extendable network as opposed to a centralized campus, and to create a widespread community of learning while also promoting economic growth. The framework for the network was a 100-year-old railway system no longer in use. Not only would it transport people between housing and learning areas, but the cars themselves would become mobile teaching units, complete with inflatable lecture theaters, fold-out desks, and information carrels. The units could be combined and transferred to various sites as needed. Now, reality is more, you know, complicated and often painful. But this was a desire from this architect to change the world through offering playfulness and the prospect of playfulness and change, and even change, as opposed to excessive programming to society. It didn't quite happen as he dreamed, but his ideas influenced other architects, and certain architectures came into being influenced by his thoughts. Again, in the 60s, people usually didn't think of, you know, environmental issues like we do today. They didn't know about the climate change. They didn't know about, I mean, they could have imagined, of course, but they didn't, you know, because those cars that we see there innocently drawn actually produce pollution, if not deadly car accidents on the highway. Anyway, when you dream, you inevitably forget certain aspects of reality. What can you do? But he was important. He is important because of his stressing the need for change, for dynamic life, for playfulness, for even for a real democracy. Because I think his architecture is essentially oriented against a central authority. The pottery thing, here you see a plan of desire. What a beautiful name, plan of desire lines, physical and mental exchange. So not just physical, but also mental. And the word desire should be noticed. And this is the plan of desire lines, physical and mental exchange. Now, how many architects today, when they do a plan for a house or for a city or for a town or for whatever, they draw lines of desire. I don't think too many, because we forgot to think in poetical terms or in aspirational terms, and the word desire is not in our vocabulary, but it was in the vocabulary of Cedric Price. A perspective of the battery, crate, and capsule housing, Longtown City. There is another drawing or collage. I don't know what that pyramid there is. I think Cedric Price, through his works or play works, or how to call them, encourages any of us who might not have clients or who are not part of, not covered by an institutional umbrella. No one can stop you from being creative and proposing things that even might be thought of being crazy at one point. But as Einstein said, for an idea which doesn't seem mad or crazy at the beginning, there is no hope. So it's better to do something that appears to be crazy, but something that you truly believe in and feel for or felt for. The City of the Future project, now 1965, I don't know. Cedric Price, do I have a picture here? Is this one, but it's impossible to read. But I mean, to look at, this was the resolution of it. Let's see how it was called, City of the Future project. And here there are perspectives. Well, let's read a little bit. Belong to a 1950s generation of British architects and educators who were intensely concerned with an architecture of the future, the same time that they saw architecture. I think I read this before, I'm not sure, or I just read it myself. Should I continue to read this? Price of the city then was inventive and current, while also expressing his sense of architecture's moral obligations. I think I read this. The drawing for a city of the future comprises 14 vignette-like perspectives with accompanying texts, which together can be considered a summary of ideas about the city that Price had presented in more detail in earlier projects. One of his principles was that the elements that make up the city, such as buildings and service devices, must respond to the user automatically. Wishful thinking, in my opinion. Essentially, he was calling for a form of artificial intelligence, an idea he had developed in his Pottery Thinkbelt project of 1963, an unconventional higher education facility that, if built, would have been located in a depressed industrial area. He also refuted the ancient assumption that buildings are stationary, suggesting instead that buildings of the modern age could move. The traveling gantry crane and suspended rooms and walkways that he had worked out in his Fun Palace project of the 60s and 61 reappear in more general terms in the City of the Future through the description, the potential of phased movement of goods, shelters, and equipment by means of mechanical and magnetic suspension. Indeed, a great declaration of love of Epimetheus towards his brother Prometheus. Generator project, I mean the very word generator, and you are going to see it many times on the next pages. He did this for Florida, designed thoughts used as reminders within Office B. I don't know what that is. Anyway, the generator, an early investigation into artificially intelligent architecture, was designed with no specific program, but only a desired end effect in mind. Look at that, a desired end effect in mind, The project was commissioned by this person from the White Oak Plantation in Florida to provide a facility to house dance, theater, and visiting artists. Cedric Price explored the type of architecture that, like medicine, would operate less as a remedy for the ills of society and more as a preventive system, creating flexible conditions previously thought impossible within a socially beneficial environment. This complicated project, for which many drawings and diagrams were made, was essentially a system of cube-like elements that could be moved and combined with others or with additional elements to create temporary structures for a rehearsal or performance space, housing, or just contemplation within a lush natural setting. You notice the word contemplation, something we forget about all the time. It was intended to operate by means of a central computer with which a visitor would combine any of 150 of the generator's 4x4 meter fully serviced air-conditioned cubes, air-conditioned, something we should abstain from these days, in my opinion, or walls, screens, gangways, and communication channels into a structure. The computer that he anticipated, because at the time when he made this, the computer was far from being what it is today. The computer would encourage the visitor to continually refine and improve his or her design. In fact, change and artistic freedom are the underlying ideas of the generator. They were considered prerequisites, and the computer was to be programmed and to make unsolicited alterations should the framework remain static. Price's intricate scheme to provide an environment dedicated to nurturing the arts was never built. Yes, an environment dedicated to nurturing the arts. That's what we need. We should fight for such an environment. We need art. Without art, life, in my opinion, would be unbearable. And when I say art, I include here everything: music, writing, sculpture, painting, architecture, everything having to do with emotions and with the artistic expression of those emotions. I just look quickly now through these sketches. He did many. I only selected a few, but I could have selected 50 more. You see everywhere, generator. Now the very word generator says a lot, and it's on every drawing. Generator, meaning a beginning, you know, a start. You generate energy in essence. You generate zest for life. If you can do that, then you can say that you didn't spend your life in a useless way. Generator. I don't know exactly what these things represent. He still works with cubes. Yes. What can you do? You know, these are the limits of the time in a way. But I like the purity and the childlikeness of the drawings. So he was explorative. He was exploring many ideas in a very free way. Some of these ideas, actually, you could say that can be found now even in, you know, in the works of Fujimoto, for example, and other architects. You know, is this continuous desire to bring movement and change within the, you know, the built environment. Cedric Price. Now, this, he asked there, what's this? A mushroom? Well. It's not really a mushroom, but he was exploring, you know, he was thinking aloud in a way. And I think we need such things, you know, so called by the Promethean follower, useless. Look at this beautiful drawing, and it's truly beautiful. You say, you know, this drawing is totally infantile, and it is. But we need the infantilism of poetry, or the poetry of infantilism. Yes, but the purity of this drawing, in my opinion, has nothing in common with the infantilism of our culture today, which is corrupted, you know, like the infantilism, the so-called infantilism of Walt Disney, the Walt Disney Empire. This is the very opposite. It's an innocent drawing on a white piece of paper, I don't know what it represents, but I see a little build structure and three trees, and that's about it. Anyway, this drawing was also part of the so-called project. Didn't I tell you that this man is Epimethean, a follower of Epimetheus? What architect today would include in a project? He was commissioned for this project, such a watercolor. He did this watercolor in Florida. He painted, he watercolored some flowers and the trunk of a tree. I like this very much. Why should the architect exclude from his work? You would say this is not professional. Come on, it's not professional. Well, it might not be so-called professional, but it is alive. Generate a project, 5 enclosures, model and baseboard. I had no idea what this is. I mean, I see a computer, but he did this in the 70s. So, a computer was just at its beginnings, but he loved this, the same man who made this arrangement of 4 or 5 technological objects made this drawing. Nature and technology. He believed in both. Again, full scale on-site mock-up with figure, 1978, 1980. The figure is here. I don't know what she's doing. And this is just the structure. I don't know what happened with it. I imagine he tried to structure the unstructurable, if I am to invent a word, or maybe this word was invented by someone else. Essentially, it was, he tried to bring some coordinates to the infinite of desire, and of course, that such an activity is destined to, not completion, or not even, creating a foundation for it, because you could very well approach a phantasmagoria in this way. Generator, a nice sensitive drawing, but what exactly, is, this drawing, this sketch is you could say, leads no one to nowhere. Yes, but his thought was here. Obviously, this man was metaphysical in his concerns, although he was attempting to become physical, but he didn't quite succeed. We are going to see one building built by him, which Sir Norman Foster can stay away from now. I think he's working on it. The Interaction Center, this one is here, and I should have had more pictures. He did it. It was built. Now, it looks like some kind of, storage space, large storage space. It's an interaction center. And indeed, in such a space, many things could happen, unplanned, spontaneous things. An urban study of a harbor. I love this watercolor. It's so pure and so dreamy. It's clear to me this was painted by Epimetheus, or by an Epimethean man, or by a follower of Epimetheus. Now, the London Zoo Aviary, and with this I will end the present. No, I will show a few more drawings at the end, but this is the work he built. Now, unfortunately, in my opinion, a true Epimethean would not build an aviary. I had to look in the dictionary because I didn't know what it meant. Well, it's a cage where you cage, it's a large cage where you cage birds. Now, this to me is contradictory to what Epimetheus stood for. Architecturally, I find it enticing and interesting, but when I think about its function, if indeed this was its function, you know, to cage birds, I never saw any bird within. Uh, its geometry is enticing, is interesting, but I hope that no bird was ever caged in here. But we have an image of what he was capable of building if he built. And I think it's very interesting. It's airy, it's dynamic, it's asymmetrical, although there are some symmetries, and you are going to see the plan. I like it, as long as there are no caged birds there. And I understood there were plans for Sir Norman Foster and his office to do something about this. This is an early study for it from 1961. You know, I laugh because in a way it's you know, it's a useless architecture. But what would you expect from a follower of Epimetheus? You know, Epimetheus didn't believe in you know, this obsession with you know, achieving a goal. And it's true, you know, some energies and money were spent to build this, and the responsible architect indulged in building this. I have a feeling that no bird ever was trapped inside this cage, which architecturally I like. I think it's very nice. Anyway, yeah, maybe this is what Sir Norman Foster brought to the structure erected by, or it's a project probably, because I see here someone who doesn't seem to be quite real. And this is the, you know, the top view, so to speak. I think it's very nice. Now, I can't explain it, but it's his spirit here, you know, change, spontaneity, transparency, technology, but I would say in a moderate way. It's nothing heavy, nothing, you know, suppressing you, nothing pushing hard on your shoulders. I would say that Epimetheus probably would have liked it, as long as, I repeat, no birds would be caged in. And look at this. I think it's very nice. It might even be one of the best buildings, if we can call it a building, of the 20th century. Because it's actually a non-building, an anti-building. Other drawings, and with this I end this, you know, insufficient in a way presentation of Cedric Price, but I don't think too many people paid homage to him today, and we do. So other drawings, we see diagrammatic thinking, we see technology, we see playfulness, we see responsibility, we see the clown here again, you know, but the clown is not smoking a big cigar as he does. But we see all kinds of functions here taking place. It's the fun palace. Yeah, so Centre Georges Pompidou, which got built, was obviously you know, inspired by the works, these, if we can call them works, the workplace or the play works of Cedric Price. Look at his sketches. You know, it's clear he had a vision. To me, it is clear he had a vision. You know, I mean, who would make all these drawings without a vision? He was a visionary architect, if we are to call him so. Change, again, change, mobility, a lot of mobility. this one, I couldn't find a higher resolution, but I like what I see. The attempt to structure the irrational in a way, the unorganized, the looking machine, or the looking machine, not the locking machine, as I felt tempted to read. I don't know what's going on here anyway. A few sketches, and this is the last image of this presentation, imperfect as it was, but I think he would not have protested against imperfection. Him smoking, still smoking, looking a little bit concerned, so to speak, through this door only half opened, or maybe not even half. Thank you. Now, because it is September 11, I will also allow myself to talk about Minoru Yamasaki, because he was the builder. I will make the presentation on him on December, because he was born in December, but I only show what he did at the World Trade Center site. That is, he built the Twin Towers. He was the author of the Twin Towers, which came down in 20 years ago, exactly 20 years ago in New York. And I have to tell you, I was at that time in the States, and I was not in New York. I was in Chicago, in Evanston, Chicago, and I was entering my building, an apartment building, and the neighbor said to me while I was waiting for the elevator, "Go quickly and turn on the TV, because a plane entered the World Trade Center, one of the towers." And I couldn't believe it. Of course, I didn't believe it. I took the elevator, although it was on the second floor, my apartment. And then I did have a TV, and not because for me, but I was living with someone. I'm trying to excuse myself because I don't like TVs at all. Anyway, I turned on the TV, and I witnessed the second plane entering, crashing into the World Trade Center. And it's true. I couldn't believe my eyes. I thought it was some kind of a Hollywood, melodrama, theater, and not real. Well, I learned not much later that it was real. It did happen. And I had actually a friend in New York who told me he was going to work on that day, and the traffic stopped on the highway, and he got out of the car, and he witnessed what I just told you in New York City happening. And about 2 weeks later, I left Chicago. In fact, I left the United States. I returned to Romania. I wanted to move back to Romania for good. So I flew from Chicago to New York. And what I was very surprised of was that my passport had a problem. I forgot exactly what it was. I think it was expired. And still, I flew with American Airlines, and they didn't check, scrupulously, attentively my passport. I was allowed to go. Well, fortunately, I was not a terrorist, so nothing happened to that plane. But it was strange, because exactly American Airlines suffered during that terrible day, September 11, 2001. But when I arrived in New York, at LaGuardia Airport, I have to tell you, I saw something that I never saw before in New York City. There were militaries and police, personnel with big rifles on their chests at each corner of the streets. And I also tell you that in Manhattan, for many blocks far away from World Trade Center, there was a smell in the air. So I said, I flew to New York 2 weeks after this happened, and it was still a very heavy smell in the air, even on 11th Street near Broadway. It was rather far away from the site of the tragedy. So it was something dramatic, very dramatic, which affected this great city, because New York City was and still is a great city. It was a cataclysm. It was a terrible tragedy, and you know, I think the psychology of the New Yorker changed then, because once I came to Romania, and on the plane, I read a newspaper where a British journalist said that he traveled to New York 40 times in I don't know how many years, and he was always amazed by the incredible capacity of this city to rejuvenate itself, to change continuously with its absolutely unbelievable vitality. And that after September 11, he saw a change, a big change, that ability of the city to change, to embrace the unknown, to act very quickly, were not there any longer. And indeed, it took a very long time, I don't know, 10, 15 years almost, to rebuild the World Trade Center. And the two towers that Minoru Yamasaki built were replaced by a single tower. There were a few other towers built around it, but the so-called World Trade Center became just one tower. And that, you know, street artist or graffiti artist, or I don't know how to call him, Bansky, he said, you know, that tower should have been built in Canada, not in the United States, and not in Manhattan, not in New York City. He didn't like that tower, and I don't like it either. It might be very safe, it might be very solid, a vertical fortress, but something is missing about it. It's not architecturally, it's not adventurous any longer. It's excessively concerned with being secure, and architecturally, to an extent, is a failure. It was designed in the end by David Childs from SOM, Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, not by Daniel Libeskind, who initially won the competition for the tower and the area around it. Anyway, let's look at the Twin Towers, since there are 20 years since they fell to the ground. I have to say, I lived for many years in New York City, and I was never truly impressed by them. And I had a good friend. In fact, the only good friend I had in New York, he worked in World Trade Center, and I visited him a few times, but I never went up on the top of the towers, and I didn't even go up to his office. We always met in the, you know, on the ground level of the towers. This is a view of the, I mean, look, there are people staying in line, I guess, to take the elevators to go all the way to the top of the buildings. But what is interesting about these towers, now that I look back to them and to the work of Minoru Yamasaki, is this is a modernism which flirted, so to speak, with Gothicism, or with a Gothic sensibility. And look at this detail, if we can call it a detail. I mean, we are talking about giant buildings, and I don't think the word giant is an exaggeration at all. But you know, the way he conceived of this, of the structure of this building, is because he allowed ornament to insinuate itself in the structure of the building, and the aesthetics of the building. And he did this so in other buildings by him. And again, I will show his many other works by him in December, when his birthday will be. And this was the plaza. I could say many things about this, because I even did myself one work for one of the competitions organized after the fall of the towers. I didn't send it, but I did a project for the memorial. So this is how the building touched the ground, so to speak, through this. And I think it's an ingenious way of, I mean, again, these buildings were huge, but even, you know, he didn't use the typical horizontal window, but these are vertical and very narrow. They appear to be narrow because the scale is, you know, giant, is immense. I mean, look at a human being here. They are like insects in this plaza. I think perhaps the most remarkable thing about this is that there were two identical towers. So I think Minoru Yamasaki somehow, I don't know if he did it consciously, unconsciously, or both. I don't know if it was an intention, but somehow he diluted, because of the doubleness, the two-ness, to use a so-called word invented by Peter Eisenmann, the two-ness of this configuration, that there are two towers. He diluted the you know, the potentially crushing power of even what the building was meant to symbolize. So it was, I think, I'm not saying, I don't know if it was intentionally a subversive gesture towards, you know, high-end capitalism, but these two towers became emblematic for Manhattan, for New York City. Unfortunately, we have to say their function was trade. It was about money. It was about you know, being merchants, and you could say this is the soul of capitalism. This is what pushes the engine of capitalism further and further and further, to move on. To move on is about you know, about transactions, about money transactions, and what can we say? Those who decided to bring down these two towers, which were the emblems of capitalism and New York City, they did so because they wanted to you know, deteriorate and to destroy the power that these towers symbolized, and quite powerfully. But they probably didn't reflect on the fact that the architect, by building two towers, two identical towers, already somehow subverted a little bit the hegemony of what one tower could have meant. But the architecture was, now that, you know, again, when I lived there, I didn't appreciate it. But now looking backwards, I'm beginning to see some qualities here that at that time I didn't appreciate. It's strange, you know. Time evolves and we change also, and sometimes we even become what we hate. Minoru Yamasaki was a very interesting man. He was born from Japanese parents, and you know, he had a lack of luck to be there in the States when you know, the consequences of the Second World War were not great if you were Japanese. And he struggled. I learned he, at the beginning, you know, he was doing all kinds of jobs, being paid very, very little. And yet he arrived at building these towers, and not only these towers, he built many other works which are worthy of a study and of reflections. What puzzles me a little bit is this impure modernism somehow. It is a modern architecture, but because of its flirtation with ornamentation and with the Gothic, although it is rather discreet and well, controlled, departs a little bit from the dogmatic modernity. Here he is, the architect, at the top, and at the bottom, older with his, his towers. He died before knowing what happened, what would happen to his creation, to the two prisms, to the two towers, to the twin towers. It's important to notice the position on the side plane of the towers, that they are not, I mean, they are face to face, but somehow obliquely. This plane here is in line with this one. So they are not, I don't know how to explain now, I'm a little bit tired, but you understand, and you see at the top. It's this, I don't know how to call it now, I can't find the word, that creates something that is not as static as it could have been. And I think he did a good job at building these buildings with this, rather they appear to be small windows because of the immensity of the dimensions. Anyway, we move forward. Here it is another image which belongs to the past. And it's just unbelievable what happened. I understand to an extent the conspiracy theories, because it seems unbelievable. It just seems unbelievable. And, there was a great intellectual in New York and in the United States, Susan Sontag, who actually said, and she said it, not long after this terrible tragedy happened, he actually said, she said something, if I remember correctly, that, we can say many things about these terrorists, but not that they didn't have courage. I mean, this was a surprising statement coming from a North American. But just try to imagine, these people went to death by their own choice. Imagine approaching the tower, you being in the cabin of the pilot, and we're rushing with the plane towards the building. To me, it seems unbelievable. I still don't comprehend it, don't believe it. It's something about it. How come that the United States couldn't do something about this? How come that this happened, and not just here, but also, at the Pentagon? And I don't know. It seems surreal. It is surreal. Now I show a few proposals, new proposals for the World Trade Center that came from various architects, just to, to complement somehow, this short presentation on this day when there are 20 years since this most unimaginable thing happened. There were all kinds of proposals, what to do here. We have just a carcass, structural one mimicking the towers as they were, in a way, a ghost building, emanating light at the top. I forgot who did this. I should have known. At that time, when I made this presentation, I knew, but now I forgot. Here, this might have been the proposal of Lipskind, Daniel Lipskind. There were a few other towers that were built around, which also fell during that terrible tragedy. I only know of one that was built by Fumihiko Maki. And anyway, this one I think was done by Peter Eisenmann. His proposal was not built, but there is something here that will relate to the last three images of this very short presentation. The fact that the towers are united by these horizontal parts, these bridges between them. So there is a sense of togetherness, of coming together here, that I think it's not a bad thing. But anyway, this was by Peter Eisenmann. This somehow because yesterday I presented the work of Rudolf Schindler, and I remember that cross he made on top of that church he built, which I showed yesterday, and this makes me think a little bit of that cross. That here you see these two. There are four towers actually, but they are connected at a 90 degrees angle, so there is also a sense of incompletion, and also depends on where you see it from. I don't know. I don't know if this would have been better to build. Perhaps it's too much with four towers identical and connected with bridges. No, actually five. I was wrong. Anyway, Peter Eisenmann. Then I see I have quite a number of pictures with his work. I don't know who did this one. There were many proposals for this site. As you can imagine, any architect would have loved to build there. But if I look at these pictures with these works, I am a little bit worried, because what are these buildings celebrating, and what did the existing towers celebrate, and what do the one that replaced the fallen towers represent? What are they celebrating? In my opinion, is a little bit worrying, this celebration of human power and of money, essentially. It's about money. It's at World Trade Center. It's about monetary transactions and financial speculations. This is what it is about, So I'm a little bit worried, It's okay. Maybe I'm naive. Maybe I have an anachronistic state of mind. But a life which so explicitly and almost violently places money at its center, and so visibly, ostentatiously, underlined, worries me. It does worry me. I forgot who did this. I used to know all of this, but I forgot. Anyway, another proposal. And another one is this by Sir Norman Foster. Is it possible? It is possible. But again, the scale, the emphasis on some the sensationalism somehow. The dimensions of these proposals. Somehow, by comparison, what Minoru Yamasaki did was less ostentatious. Here I see it's just this limitless belief in this triumphalism of the humans on Earth. Now, of course, from today, the year 2021, when we know that the levels of the seas is rising, when the pandemic is humiliating us, when the icebergs are melting, and when there is so much pollution, and there are so many troubles in the world, maybe this kind of triumphalism seems to me actually to be off, to be very problematic. I don't know if it was Sir Norman Foster or not, but whoever proposed this, but I think it was him. I mean, can we still talk about scale here? I don't think so. And here he comes. Ingalls couldn't miss the boat, but he did miss it. It was not built, but he had to stack his cubes one above the other, you know, almost competing in height with the built World Trade Center. What can we say? It is true that, I mean, in a way, going back to Cedric Price, we do have to say that there are reasons to think of an anti-architect or an-architect or anti-building or an-architecture, because really the architect very, very rarely is capable or even willing to have a certain modesty, you know, and I think we need more modest architects, but is it possible, something like this? I mean, you know, it's a contradiction in terms to build a modest skyscraper. It is a contradiction in terms. Anyway, I will end. I have 3 more images, and with this I end the presentation today. I will show you the storefront windows, or the windows of my so-called gallery and studio in Evanston, Chicago, where I showed a project done by an assistant professor at the University of Architecture and Urbanism in Bucharest. He proposed 2 towers too. I don't know if he sent his proposal to the competition for the World Trade Center. He proposed 2 towers inspired by the sculpture by Brâncuș, the Kiss. So 1 black tower and one white tower which embrace. And I think I like this idea, and I thought of I even wrote you know, something about this work, which I cannot read now, and even if I could, I would not, because it's a little bit late. And anyway, but I did say that the name of what he proposed should have been, or the initials, WEC instead of WTC. That is not World Trade Center, but World Embrace Center, because this is what he proposed suggests. It's about embracing each other, about you know, it's about unity, it's about it's not about adversity, it's about shaking hands in a way. And I like his proposal very much. How are we to fight against the misery and the tragedy of what happened, if not through trying to understand the other side, the other story, you know, of the other one, except through shaking hands and embracing. And these towers show exactly this. Yeah, World Embrace Center as opposed to World Trade Center. And here you see the source of inspiration in the beautiful sculpture by Constantin Brâncuș. Thank you. Yeah, but you know what? I really take this opportunity, because I made presentations about you too here on Zoom. I don't know if you know.
I didn't know that.
Yes, I did. And because I invented this ethereal or etheric prize, the other Pritzker Prize, which I offered until now to Stephen Hall, Wolf Briggs, Bernard Tschumi, Peter Eisenmann, and is something wrong with me now? I always forget the 5th one. Anyway, again, I better shut up because I say stupidities. I am shocked that you showed up in the car. But I did talk about you. I have presentations about you, and I don't know if you know, we had been somehow so-called colleagues a long time ago, associated with Storefront. You know,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, but it's a long time since then, and you flew very high, and I disappeared. But I reemerge now in my maybe bizarre or strange way. You know, Elizabeth, is some why I am emotional now is because an architect of your caliber makes time to enter on Zoom, and even if late, it's a gesture of dialogue, of it's about, I don't know. I'm not inspired now because yes, I am stunned. But I have to tell you, on this modest Zoom platform, there are surprising visits. We had a visit from Wolf Prix. We had two from Bernard Tschumi. We had from Stephen Hall. And last year, we had a lot of people here because anyway, we remember the Levia suits. I just said that my clients are almost all of them dead. I talk about those who disappeared, like Cedric Price and like Minoru Yamasaki, but one day will disappear too. But let's hope through our works we will not disappear. I'm sure I'm sure you are not going to disappear because you're being because of your views.
Well, one doesn't design for legacy, right? One designs for our time. But it's interesting that Cedric Price is on the table, and he's never disappeared. He's as relevant today as he was in the 60s. So I think that that person, that research, which I think was intended, many ways. I was thinking the other day that he shot himself in the foot on many projects deliberately because the projects were rhetorical. However, they were for architects in the future generations. I think that they became very real and very real inspiration for buildings. And so, I think he had a massive influence on architects. As a thinker, academic, but his projects were not entirely rhetorical. I was looking the other day with students at the generator, for example, and it was a really, really brilliant project in early AI. And I think back on how ahead of his time he was. So I don't know how far you got into the less known projects. But
I did know. I did show drawings from the generator project.
Yeah.
Yes, but in what way do you think he shot himself in the in his
because the ideas were so extreme, in a way that and I think he was trying to provoke the dialogue in his clients that they were in a kind of realm of theory. And for example, that when when the occupants of the generator were too lazy to actually make the changes, that the computing system would do it for them. And and of course that it would never, no one would ever buy it, of course, but I think that the provocateur in him really sort of pushed the idea to the limit. And I think that project in and of itself was probably meant for drawings, to be. In the end, there's a interesting history of the client and, you know, the associations with MoMA and so forth. But I don't know. I think that he led a life in which, you know, very early inspirations led to heartaches, and then, you know, in the end, the work was intended for, you know, for the inspiration of others, and maybe that's why, you know, I think it's rhetorical in a way.
No, but Elizabeth, I begin my presentation today by descending in time, maybe excessively. I said, we know about Prometheus, the one who stole fire from the gods and gave it to the humans. And I learned later that he had a brother. Prometheus had a brother, a forgotten brother. I learned this from Goethe. He wrote a play called Prometheus, but in the play is mentioned Epimetheus. So I became very curious, who is this Epimetheus? And in Greek, Prometheus means the one who first thinks and then he acts, while Epimetheus in Greek means the very opposite, the one who first acts and then he thinks. And I truly think Cedric Price is an Epimethean figure. Why? Because Epimetheus loved spontaneity, and he was against the power structure that Prometheus was serving, actually. Epimetheus was the very opposite of Prometheus in many ways, and Cedric Price appeared to be against architecture. He invented the word anarchitect. You know, what is an architect? What is anti-building? I mean, he was an architect who loved architecture, but paradoxically, he seemed to turn against it. And so there is some kind of subversiveness in his work that Epimetheus symbolized. This is a thought I had, and this connects somehow with what you said, that, you know, he shot himself. He appeared to deconstruct himself, not because he didn't love what he was working for, but the very opposite. He was a paradoxical architect, and I think there is something that I admire about his so-called unarchitecture, the playfulness which is so important to creativity, and often we, morose as we are, forget to play. This man, just like Epimetheus, promoted playfulness and change and spontaneity and innocence. Even his drawings are very innocent. And that kind of innocence is no surprise to me that he received the Kistler Prize in Vienna in 2002. That's why I mentioned it, because I see some kind of a relation between Cedric Price and Frederick Kistler.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting because the Kistler Prize, I was just the jury of the Kistler Prize. But I have arrived at my destination. I have to get out of the car. But, you know, I would just say that, you know, the anti-architect is again, you know, we like to put prefixes in front of, you know, in front of words because, you know, to further define them. And I think, of course, he was against the profession, but not the discipline. You know, the profession was in a way, in many ways, corrupt, and he was an intellect, you know, and it's hard to operate as an intellect in a world that's really about, you know, it's about something else. But anyway, he was, you know, I think his social interest, his empathy was very different from others, you know, that were doing experimental work at the time. And, you know, I think he's just an architect of another order. And so I think the word anti is the playful part, but he was really an architect. And, you know, I do think that the Fun Palace should have been built. And you know, that was, you know, and I think a heartache like that after so many years is enough to break anyone, you know, so I understand a bit. But anyway, thank you for that you're doing these lectures. It's great to keep the discourse alive, and good luck. And I hope this was recorded so I can hear something that, you know, your words from before.
Okay,
But-
we paid homage to Cedric Price, and I'm sure he appreciates from wherever he is. I'm sure. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.